vision. Should be revision for everyone, passive range of motion and active range of motion. Does anyone want to hazard a guess at defining passive range of motion? No? No one? Has anyone not covered passive range before?
I remember we did it with, I think it's maybe scour test. You were showing us with that. I'm kind of forgetting what it was, but I remember. Yeah, it's right. Lost it.
We'll cover it anyway. Right, so we've got passive, active. Work. Sweet. So these are simplified explanations of what passive range of motion are. The explanations are designed to serve the purpose of what we're going to cover today and how we're going to use this stuff. So for those that can't see it, passive range of motion is basically structural limitations, right? The shape of bone primarily, the length of bone, and other tissues like ligaments, tendons, muscles. Passive range of motion is basically where your body can and can't go when moved under someone else's power. Right? So you're basically just lying there relaxed, not helping them at all. Think of passive range as the hardware that you're working with. Right, we've got active range of motion. Active range of motion, we're primarily talking about a client's strength, their coordination, their proprioception. And when you're assessing someone's active range of motion, you're looking at their capacity to move under their own power, right? They're doing the movement. You're not guiding them through it, holding them, or anything like that. Sure. Right. So today we're covering laptop with this.
See you, mate.
Basically, an intro to the screening that we're going to use, and this idea of the movement breakdown. The movement breakdown is a concept we're going to use for the screening, but it's also going to go on to some other stuff. Right, so why we're learning all this? Understanding exercises and the limitations of your client's bodies is necessary for effective, safe and fun programming, right? Effective is the big one. Are we getting the outcome that we want for them? The objectives for today are for you guys to develop a basic understanding of the movement breakdown, which is going to be a new concept that we'll go over, and develop an understanding and experience of the screening process that we're going to use. Right. So what we do as coaches can be reduced to 3 questions. What are the client's goals? What adaptations are necessary to achieve those goals? How will you apply stress to achieve those adaptations, right? When we write a program for a client, we're essentially providing them a prescription that answers those questions. You prescribe stress in different forms to get the adaptations that you want, and those adaptations achieve their goals. So the goal might be, I want to be bigger, stronger, faster, smaller. The adaptations are probably going to be, well, I need to give them some hypertrophy, I need to increase the contractile potential of their muscle and their coordination if they want to be able to do anything with that strength. If they want to be smaller, that's probably going to have a lot to do with nutrition and a bit to do with your exercise programming, right? And the different types of stress that you apply to achieve those, whether they want to be bigger, smaller, faster, all that sort of stuff, right? And when we do that, we've got an enormous amount of literature and useful tools, tables and stuff to help us with the load, reps, sets, and rest when we write a program, right? But probably not for the mechanics, as far as which movements are you going to use, why are you using those movements, what is the effect going to be of those movements. So today we essentially want to start learning about how we can use the mechanics to get the adaptations we want, right? The mechanics of the actual movements our clients are performing. As far as what we're covering today, it's sort of the first step in being able to answer these questions. What does each movement demand of the body in a general sense? What demands will your client's body tolerate? Where is your client's body likely to fail, and what will that look like when it happens? How can you modify movements to keep your programs interesting for your clients without significantly changing the adaptation that you're giving them? Right? You get some people that I don't want to just do bench press, deadlift, back squat every week, 3 days a week for 4 weeks, right? They get bored, they don't come back. A client who doesn't come back, you can't help them, and you can't make a living out of it either, right? So we want to find a way to marry the two together without it being boring and repetitive. Has anyone got any questions at this point? We're sort of just going over it pretty generally. We'll get into it a bit deeper now. Right, so I talked about the new concept of the movement breakdown. The idea is we want a systematic approach, right? It's going to help us understand movement, it's going to help us understand our clients, and it has to help us program in the context of those two things, right? Our clients and the movements. That's ideally what we want. The working parts of those first two things, the clients and the movements, that is insanely complex, right? The likelihood of you identifying and analysing every single one correctly is just ridiculous, right? So you compartmentalise the process into manageable chunks. And that's what we're going to do with the movement breakdown. Compartmentalising it is going to help us to plan our progressions and regressions of certain movements. We're going to use it to identify faults, and we're going to use it to plan, I guess, solutions to the faults that we identify in our clients or the movements that sort of exceed their capacity. So, the movement breakdown consists of three primary parts. You've got movement families, you've got stress locations, and you've got types of stress. Movement families. We've got squats, we've got deadlifts, presses, and pulls. Every movement you program, with few exceptions, can be considered a progression, a regression, or a combination of these three movements. Right? You think about a clean and jerk. It's a combination of all three of those. It starts with a deadlift, progresses into a squat with a transition phase in the middle, finishes with a press. Right? Stress locations. Scout the body. Okay, and this is useful because these are present in every single movement you do. Right? The body is the one thing that's consistent. You can change the movement you're programming. The person still has a torso, still has shoulders and hips, still has arms and legs. If you understand the limitations of that, you've got a long way to understanding the movements themselves, right? Because all the movements do is challenge you to use those things under different types of stress. So we've got the core, which is basically the spine, the skull, the torso. We've got the interfaces, right? Which are the hips and the shoulders. We've got the extremities, which is broken down into upper body extremities, the arms, and lower body extremities, the legs. These three primary locations are the areas we depend on to express power. Right? So you think when you go through your Cert 3, Cert 4, they talk about generating power from core to extremity. That is the process, that is the order. It goes from the core depends on the interface to help the arms and legs gain leverage to express that power, right? They all depend on each other. If there's a fault in one area, the other ones will have to pick up the slack. And if you think about, when people move, think about this idea of coordination is a force multiplier. The more coordinated you are, the less you require of any individual component, the more effective you can be with the same amount of strength, right? I don't know if Al was there for it. Rach, you were there for the last Ollie seminar when we had Rich. I think he was testing his clean, right? He PR'd, he'd never done Olympic lifting before, I think. He's basically did a 12-week program. In this last seminar, I think his clean, not even from the floor, I think we were actually working in from here for a bit, and it wasn't even full depth, 105 kilos, I think it was, right? Someone 12 weeks, and I think there was like a 40 kilo increase on the day. There was no way in hell we made that guy 40 kilos stronger on the day. All we did was make him more efficient, right? We taught him to do more with the same amount. Right. The last part of the movement breakdown are the two different types of stress. Passive stress and active stress. We think of passive stress as the hardware, right? The hardware is pretty constant. You can tweak it here and there, but you can't really magically make it more powerful, right? It's constant. We've got the active stress, which is the software. The software runs on the hardware. You can try and run software that exceeds the capacity of your hardware, but but it doesn't go too well, right? Things start to slow down. They don't work properly or they don't work at all. So passive, we're talking about structures you can't change. Joint shape, bone length, that sort of stuff. Exceeding your client's capacity for passive stress will force them to compensate somewhat, right? Passive stress must be applied within the structural limitations. If you are going to exceed a client's structural limitations, you better have a good reason for doing it, because the risk of injury is going to go up significantly. You can do it, but you want to know that movement very well, and you want to be doing it deliberately. You don't want to be letting them exceed them just because you don't know what's going on. You don't care to cue them, right? Because you'll be held responsible. Active stress. These are the variables you can change. Strength, speed, coordination, and proprioception. Unlike the passive stress, we actually want to exceed the active stress. We depend on it to get an adaptation in the first place, right? So that's where a lot of our work's going to go, into exceeding the client's current capacity for active stress in a very deliberate, very careful way. When we put all of that together, this is the system that we get. You have a movement. That movement can be broken down into 3 locations. Okay, the core, the interfaces, the extremities, and they can be broken down further. So the movement can be defined by the types of stress we apply, where we apply them. Right? If I want to progress or regress the movement, I adapt the type of stress that I'm applying. Right? Now this is just sort of a cursory overview at the moment. The screening we're going to do maps onto this process, and we'll go into it in much more depth in the following seminars, but basically you just need to understand what these terms are and how they relate to each other, right? Our client's body can be mapped on to that. And the demands of different movements can be mapped onto that too, right? We want to see what aligns, what doesn't align, and that'll start to give us an idea of what the client's capable of doing, what they're not, and where we need to get them doing more work.
Sam, can you just go over, I think when people look at core, they might just think core. And in fact, you're talking,
Yeah, so we're from the core, we're essentially talking about both sides of it, right? Talking about midline stability, essentially. Now we've got passive and active there, but the passive requirements for the core in most movements is going to be exactly the same. Okay, we want it to be neutral and that's it. You have exceptions. Certain gymnastics movements will send you way outside that neutral position. Certain types of deadlift, like rounded back deadlifts, we're going to push us out of there. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Yes.
Or is it something more subtle? Right. The interfaces, we've got the shoulders and the hips, right? Think about, you can almost think of these like the hinge in the door, right? Without the hinge, it doesn't do anything. It's not going anywhere. If you want to be able to use these to push weight, they get their leverage from here, right? If these aren't secure, i.e. they can't get their leverage from here, start to compensate, right? You see people who sort of just go into this disgusting sort of overextended position when they're pressing overhead. They're stable, but they're stable because they've basically gone to their end range for passive stress and just locked off the bones and hanging there, right? It's not particularly productive, it's not particularly useful. If you want to progress that movement to something more complex like an overhead squat, you can't do it, right? Because they don't know how to stabilize their torso. As movements as the stress you apply to your clients with like load, speed, complexity goes up, the risk is going to go up as well, right? If they don't know how to stabilize their shoulder, they'll get into some real funky positions to try and find their own way there.
Can I add something to that? For most of us, we viscerally understand this, and contextually we may have learnt it in a different way, but this is the framework that Sam's come up with, and I really like it. So this is sort of how we want to evolve and start talking about movement.
Yeah, the content of it isn't new, right? Everyone knows what a shoulder is, what a hip is, what the legs are. It's how do we put all that together so we can actually do something productive with the knowledge. Same as, if you want to be strong, you don't just go, oh, well, I just need to have big muscles and they need to be able to contract. Like, no, I need to be able to do something with them. I need to be able to push a weight. I need to be able to pull a weight or resist something, yeah? So it's about productive application of the knowledge we've got. We're trying to sort of marry it all together. Any questions before we move on? Let's move on. Right, so the screening. The screening consists of 10 assessments. We've got passive and active stress that we're going to assess at the core, the interfaces, and the extremities. The assessments that we do are going to map onto those three movement families that we talked about, right? What basically the demands are of those three types of movement. We've got three passive range of motion tests. Those passive tests are going to define the structural boundaries for our clients. Okay, and we're going to be using that to inform the programming of different movements, right? Say you've got a client who has a really funky hip shape and they're just not built to go parallel, go below parallel. If you force them to operate outside that structural boundary, where are they going to find the room? Can't find it in the hip, it's bone. It's not moving. So what can they move? They can move the spine. That'll get them there, right? They can go really wide and collapse the knees in, and they can get there, right? So we want to understand what the passive requirements are for a movement under the most demanding conditions, right? So the ideal body and the heaviest possible weight. So it's always a 1 RM that we're thinking of these in, right? The active range. We want to understand how and where our clients are likely to fail under stress. The information that we get from the active tests is going to give us a bit of an idea about their risk to injury in certain movements, especially if they're very uncoordinated and can't stabilise their core. But it's also going to help us understand about progressions for clients that maybe are a bit further along and regressions for clients that aren't. Cool? There's got a bit of reference material. The obvious one is the screening form, okay, that you're going to use when you conduct the screening. We've got up some cheat sheets to sort of help you make sense of, to give you information on the assessments you're going to be doing and how those assessments tie into those different movement families to help you with your programming. Cool. So the screening form, fill one out for every new client. If you want to fill it out for your old ones, go ahead. Keep a copy with their records. Right? You might want to photocopy one for yourself. So that if you keep your own records on your clients, you don't have to come in here for your programming stuff, or just scan it and keep a digital copy if that's easier. Right? Those screening forms are getting passed out now. We'll go through them as we actually get into the practical phase. What's that? Yeah, there should be one left. Yeah. The cheat sheets. So I'll put the cheat sheets up here once we actually start getting into the screening, but this is essentially the information that you're going to have in the cheat sheet. You've got the name of the assessment, the aim is going to tell you what you're assessing for your client, and you've got relevance. So this is what we were talking about, the mapping onto the movement families. Which movement families is this assessment relevant to? And what's the assessment going to tell you about us? What is this assessment going to tell you about those movements specifically, right? Or maybe some common variations of those movements as well. But the method, this isn't a how-to from top to bottom, right? They're just going to be key points that you want to remember while you're performing the test so you get the information you need so you don't hurt your clients. Assessment. Which of the stress locations am I collecting information on? What's that information going to be? Comparison. Which other assessments within the screening do you want to compare this to get a more detailed idea of the client and their limitations? And the last one is a new thing, the idea of a kinesthetic reference. And it's not for the screening, it's actually for coaching, right? For cueing your clients. So I'm sure every single person here has had an experience where they've given a cue to their client and the meaning of it gets lost in translation. You know what you mean. When you watch what they're doing, the two have absolutely nothing to do with each other whatsoever, right? It's really difficult to communicate that through words. What is a bit easier is if you can communicate without feel and what the movement is supposed to feel like. So the idea of the kinesthetic reference is that there are certain things we're doing in this assessment which, if they remember them, we can use it to make their movements better, right? So you've got a client who's pressing overhead and they just open up that entire rib cage. You go, I need you to place your rib. How do I do that? You remember during the assessment we did a hollow body test, and I got you to bring these 2 points together, and I taught you how to do it. Remember what that felt like? Do that. Right, so you're both talking about exactly the same thing in that moment.
That's powerful.
Hopefully. I've sort of, in the cheat sheets that we're going to use, I've put some basic indications of what they're going to be good references for. But if you guys find that it's useful for other stuff, tell Joe, tell Al, tell me, and we'll update it so everyone's got a record of it and we can sort of make it more useful over time. Right, that's what a completed one looks like. Sorry, far away, the text is probably a bit small, but we'll just, I'll read it out and we'll go through it. So the aim of the hip scout, which is the first test we're going to do, we want to assess the shape of the hip socket and its relationship with the head and neck of the femur. It's also going to give us an idea of potential knee and ankle positions for our client in the squat. Relevance. It's relevant to the squat and it's relevant to the deadlift. Okay, as far as the squat goes, it's basically going to tell us what the maximum depth our client can squat to is, and it's going to give us an idea of the optimal width of their stance and their knees in order to achieve that depth. As far as the deadlift goes, it's really just going to be applicable to, do they have the capacity to do a conventional deadlift? We want to find out whether they actually have the range in the hip to get to a 90-degree angle here without jamming the femur into the hip and impinging it. Most people are going to pass that with flying colours, right? Nothing for the press. Has nothing to do with the press method. Don't force the body's movement past slight resistance. Information on where certain bones need to be placed, like the femur. We don't want to internally rotate it because that's deliberately going to impinge the client. Perform the test on both legs. It's probably useful if you're doing a limb assessment. And then the assessment, we start to go into more detail of the information that we're collecting, where we're collecting it, right? And you can see it's broken down in the system we talked about before. You've got your movement families up the top. You've got your stress locations here, right? And we basically have the screening broke up into passive assessments and active assessments, which is the other part of the puzzle of types of stress. Got our comparisons down the bottom. So you want to compare this to the quadruped rock, which is going to be the second one that we go over, the 3 squat tests that we'll go over towards the end, and the broomstick bow, which is a deadlift related test. Okay, but there's no kinesthetic reference. So this is a passive assessment. They're not doing it under their own power, you're moving them. Right? So they don't really have a reference for what it feels like. It's not going to be particularly useful for you. Right. We're going to have a break and then go into the practical phase. Before we do, has anyone got any questions? Sweet, I've got questions for you. One of the movement families, or 3 of them. Yep, 3 is fine. 3. Stress locations. I want the main ones. Al, do you want to give me one of them?
Passive.
No, that's
Core.
a type.
Core.
Locations.
Interface.
Yeah. Core, Mason.
Extremities,
Yep. What does the extremities break down into?
upper lower body,
Sweet. Ali, what's the last one?
Hips, shoulders.
Yep, which are a type of
Interface.
yeah. Sweet. The 2 types of the interface. I was trying to think of something that wasn't too ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was like, it's just going to be which is the least awkward term I can come up with. But they're technically accurate, which is my favourite fun of accurate. The 2 types of stress. Can you give me one, Kimmy?
Passive and active.
Yep, 2 are fine. Cool. So no questions? Except maybe about the counting ability and stuff?
overachievers here.
No, so we can take a quick break after that. If you have a look on the left-hand side, you've got the name of the assessment and the different areas that we're sort of collecting information on. And then to the right of that, you've got left or right, or for certain movements, like the, if you go on to page 3, you've got the squats test. And it's broken down into the back squat, the front squat, and the overhead squat. Right? For most of it, you're either just going to circle what you want, cross out, whatever works for you. Just just make sure that you understand it, whatever, however you choose to mark it. Right, so first one we're going to go over is the tip scale. Who wants to do a demo? Yeah, sweet, thanks for volunteering. Cool. Just come out here and just jump basically.
Josh,
and
do you wanna-
come in nice and close, guys, so you can see this.
Record though? It'll help you better if you record.
I'll write it down. This is one I remember most. I remember this most from the last
We
one.
need to change that, that's fine. What we'll basically do is, I'll do a full demo of the assessment on Josh, so you can see what it looks like from where to go. Then we'll break it down into components and I'll sort of go through it, show you the areas I'm looking at, where I'm marking on the sheet, and all of that sort of stuff. Once we've done that, you guys will break up and you'll assess each other and track all your data on your form, right? So come in nice and close so you can see what's going on. Because there'll be small things that you want to see or need to see.
Hopefully you're wearing undies, mate.
I was just going to say, I've got very tight shorts on, so I'm sure that's going to be out.
It's all right, I'll be the only one that sees it, but I'll get
Okay, the sexual harassment officer's present.
Right, just want to put your head facing that way so this guys can see it. Right. So, I'm just going to do this on one side of Josh's body. So I'm going to take a knee, basically want to sort of put my hip pretty close to his hip, because that's going to allow me to move forwards and move backwards as I'm assessing him. So I'm just going to stay relaxed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up his leg from the base of the calf. My other hand's basically going to go on the outside of the knee. So he's going to stay there nice and relaxed. People might be a bit tense to begin with. Some people will just stay tense. If you need him to relax, just start moving it around and they tend to sort of chill out after a little while, right? So, now the look, we're basically looking at the shape of the hip and how it's going to affect our client's ability to squat. That's the primary thing, right? So we're going to try and replicate that squat position. So this is pretty narrow here. If you look at where his foot is in relationship to his knee, that's a pretty ridiculous squat there, right? So you can already see, and I'm not forcing this, as soon as I push it up, that hip is just sending that knee outside. So what I want to do is find the hip, the inside of it, there it is. I'm just going to slowly push up with this back hand. And it's going to give you an idea of the shape of the hip. Now, I also want to try and replicate the squat to an extent, right? So where I put his lower body, his lower legs is important. Okay, I don't want to have this pointed up, in. I don't want to rotate anything. I want to keep it as close to the squat as possible. So I'm just going to try and find the point where I can get him below parallel while keeping his feet flat. Right. Anywhere past here is sort of a win. We're below parallel, which is going to be a competition with climbing. Right, so that foot is essentially straight under his shoulder. Is there any pain? Some people can get like a pain, especially as the femur makes contact. Okay, it can be something as simple as like if you're actually touching the labrum. It could be something like arthritis as well. And if there's pain when they're doing the movement, it's going to change the way they perform it so that they can avoid the pain. And it's going to cause that compensation that we want to avoid. So,
Sam, in the first one, you talked about pushing the femur to the back of the joint and then. So,
I'm not sure if I did. The thing is that it's not necessarily going to go to the back of the joint when they do the movement.
yeah.
Because the thing is, I'm pushing it back. I'm pushing it back sort of that way. When he's doing the movement, it's going to get pushed
Correct.
that way, right? So I sort of have to go here, put pressure on it, and I just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to put as little pressure on it as possible. I'll sort that out in a second. What it'll say up there under method is, do not go past R1. R1 is sort of light resistance. So you can see, as soon as I hit the hip there, I'm not forcing it, trying to make the range. I'm letting that resistance guide where the leg goes, right? But if I put too much pressure on it, I can give myself false information. The pressing on it might have been a mobility thing.
Right.
Jump back up. Thanks. Cool. So if you have a look at your form, you've got the left, which is what I assessed, okay, and you can see you've got knee width for maximum depth. Outside the shoulder, under the shoulder, and the hip, right? So that's sort of, you think about it, actually, if you have a look at left and right, they're mirror images of each other, right? So they're basically trying to represent what the body's going to be like. So you've got the hips on the inside, the shoulders are wider, you've got outside the shoulder further. Either just circle one of them. If it's in between, I've just been putting a cross between the two, right? So if it's not under the shoulder and it's not way outside the shoulder, I'll just put a cross in between. So I've got a rough idea of where their optimal width is in order to get them as deep as possible.
Mine was pretty under the shoulder, hey?
Yeah, it's pretty much directly under the shoulder, but your foot is able to come in a little bit, so you're not going to be neutral, you're going to be sort of
You got broad shoulders
out
too, mate.
with the knees. You're not like, you don't have to be like that, knee over the toe.
Yeah.
You have your feet there and the knees wide.
Yeah, so my knees push out one of my feet.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we did, right? You notice like the foot was pretty close to the hip,
Yeah.
the knee, it just wants to go
Yeah.
super wide. Awesome for rugby. Maybe not for being a sprinter or a great jumper. What's that?
I got sit-ups.
Yeah, we think about sumo deadlift, right? Wide stance. Certain people, they're just not going to be able to go past parallel. It's going to hit and then just want to go and just cut straight out to the side. I think it's called Scottish hip.
Celtic
Right?
hip.
Celtic hip. That was the one.
Yeah.
Celtic hip. And what it's basically telling you is that those people are not built to be powerful here. Wide, real powerful. Also, safest narrow stance. Okay, we sort of, all I'm looking for with narrow stance is to do with the deadlift. And I just want to see, basically, if I put their feet under their hips and their knees under their hips, can I create a 90-degree angle here, right? Because that's basically my conventional deadlift. Once I go below 90 degrees, I'm actually changing the angle here. I'm moving the hips, so it's a slightly different thing to assess. And we've got now pain, right? It's passive. So there really shouldn't be any pain unless there's actually something in there, something inflamed. Something that's a bit nasty. Cool? Does anyone have any questions about the hip scale before you break up? Do your own ones? No? Cool. Break up into your own pairs. Start going through the hip scale. You're going to do both legs. You're going to do each other. Nothing sus. So the next one we're going to do is the quadruped rock. We're looking at roughly the same things. We're sort of looking to see how deep they can go before they start to tuck under. What this one's really useful for though is butt wink. So has anyone not heard someone explain away butt wink as, oh yeah, my hammies are just too short. They're too tight. They just pull me around and that's why my butt tucks under and why, you know, I risk herniating myself every time I squat, right? It's been around for ages. People go, oh no, my hammies are too tight, so they squat down, and then that happens. At the bottom, you go, oh yeah, no, I just got short hammies today. No. Maybe it's
say
just a
that?
CrossFit thing. Oh yeah,
CrossFit.
it's just right.
What was that about?
Right in CrossFit. Like every day, someone comes in and goes, "You're just got tight hammies,"
heard that.
and you're just like, they're not changing their length. They're the same length.
I get it.
Right. So, passive test. We're talking about we're assessing the length of a structure. This passive test allows us to assess whether the hamstrings will actually pull them round. I've never seen it, never. And we've tested a fair few people up to this point, right? Or, no, I don't know if I want to demo you. Let's go Mason.
It is recording.
Why? I'm just sharing love.
Cheers, mate.
So,
Have a good weekend.
anyway, basically, quadruped rock is performed in this position, right? Seriously, it's nothing sus. What I'm going to get you to do is try and put as much weight as possible through your hands and arms. I don't want this on, I don't want this on. And I'm going to get you to use your arms to try and push your bum towards your heels.
It's a full moon.
Yeah. Were there any holes back there?
Nah, you're good. You're good.
Only the reply.
Cool. So, we can use this as a secondary assessment for a lot of the stuff that we checked in the hip scale.
CBJ. You wearing a dress shirt?
Yep.
Nice.
Back it up.
BG, can you close that front door, mate? Thank you.
Cool. So the information that we just collected in that hip scale, we're collecting very similar information here. So if we perform two different tests and we get exactly the same information, it starts giving us an indication that what we're finding is probably true, right? And that it probably exists. But we've also got the added part of the hammy. So jump into your quadruped position for me. Basically, you're all fours. Now the thing for this is that's got to be on. It's got to be tight, right? So all the air out of your body. Relax here for a second. There we go. All the air out. Get tight. Keep it tight. You can breathe into the space you've created. Do not change your body. Slowly using your arms, I want you to push this towards here. Cool, come back up. Drop this down. There we go.
So what are you looking for?
What I'm looking for, you probably should have pointed that out. What we're looking for is butt wedge, right? So posterior hip tilt. So what it'll look like is they'll come back and you'll see that. It'll just tuck or they'll go and round the spine, right? So that's why we want to make sure that that torso's flat to begin with. Because if it's not,
movements with that lower.
what we're looking for is a change in this position here, right? So that it's really important that I get him set up in the right position.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm starting with bad information,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm looking for change. So you get all your weight through here, pushing this back to here. Yeah, come back forward a little bit. So we're about there. So that's, if you have a look at this space here, yeah, it's one finger. Come back up, thanks. So you have a look, where have I got it? Assessment, E, at optimal width and depth. How far is the base of the heel from the glutes? Use fist or splayed hands.
Yeah,
Right? When I
that's
say
what you
use
meant.
fist-
You meant
You
one
said one finger.
One hand.
One finger.
Is that? Yeah, okay, I
Yeah.
see what you're saying.
So if you have a look in the test, there'll be other ones where it'll basically say, you know, glute to heel distance. Yeah, keep the fist outside the body. Glute to heel distance, and it'll just have use hands,
Professional.
use fist or splayed hands, right? And then it'll have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus. If you're going to use and this is just relevant to, this is a measurement just for you because it's due to the shape of your hand. The hand always has to be fully open if you're going to use the fingers, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah,
Nice.
knuckles. So we're counting the
Oh,
distance.
he means that way, like
Yeah.
flat, don't you? And then
Yeah.
what-
So this is the distance that we're covering.
like the angle.
Across here, right? It's not angle, it's distance.
Yeah.
So what is the distance between these 2 points? Between these two, between these two, between these two, between these two, and it gets bigger, right? Now, if that's a big gap, you're going to use your hand. If it's not, and it's small, like it fits inside that, use that. Use the distance between the knuckles, right? So it takes me 1 knuckle, 2 knuckle, 3 knuckle, yeah? You just got to change the numbers on the thing. If it's any more than the splayed hand, it's 5 plus, right? It's outside that range. So, quadruped rock. Ideally, we want to try to replicate the same lower limb position that we found was ideal in the hip scout. So you want to have a look at your test and go, where is the knee in relation to the shoulder? Think about where that foot position needs to be. And then as they go back, we're basically just looking for flexion, tuck under, right?
And as an aside, if you get all giggly with your gliding like knuckles, fingers, they're likely to get a bit uncomfortable as well. So maybe
Yeah, you don't need to
even have
explain it to them.
Yeah.
Like they're looking the other way. You don't want to
Two
brandish
fingers.
it before you go in there to measure it. Just put it between their heel
Yeah.
and their butt, right? Don't just be, it's like not like putting on a rubber glove.
That's exactly it.
It's what
Yeah. And working with other professionals as well, like you could say to the physio, you've done the scale, you've done the quadrip drop, this is what you found. Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
In some instances, this may prompt you to think, I might actually need to send this person to, if it's like some of the pain stuff, if they've got hip impingement pain and you're a coach who likes programming squats, I want to send them off and see, maybe they've got some arthritis. Yeah, and we don't want to inflame that and make it worse. And other things might be this person wants to compete in a certain sport or wants to continue competing in a certain sport, and I'm finding that their body may not be designed to really participate in it. Can you as a professional go and have a look at this and tell me what you think, right? Because that's in their scope of practice. It's not in our scope of practice. We're just looking for indicators to give us an idea of where we want to go. Right, the supine straight arm rise, straight arm raise. The last two we looked at were primarily the hips, one of the interfaces, and the lower body extremities. This is the first one that looks at the shoulders and the arms. Ideally, what we're looking for is, can we get them to an overhead position without compromising the midline, without getting them doing like weird funky things, or a big one is internal rotation of the humerus to get range, bending the elbow. Right? You see, if you watch CrossFit competition and you watch someone doing kipping chin-ups, watch their elbow when they go forward in their kip. You see that elbow pop out, they're doing is popping the elbow out so they can rotate the shoulder forward and get further forward, okay? Aside from increasing their risk of injury, the power actually goes out the window, because the power in the kip is, can you generate a whole bunch of tension like an elastic band and then let it go to fire you back the other way. As soon as they cock the elbow and pop it round, they've given off all that tension that they've got, right? Anyway, primarily going to be for the overhead movements, overhead squats, overhead presses, strict pressing, that sort of stuff. Just like the other ones, we don't want to force them past R1, that light resistance. What else? Anything here before we get into it?
Maybe make a note on your sheets what R1 represents so that you remember.
Yeah, I think, just remember the name of the...
Light resistance R1.
Who was the dude that came in? What Colin used to work for?
Brad Hiskins,
That's the
R1.
one, yeah. Cool.
I used to use that term when I learned how to drive. Like with the clutch, burst bit of resistance. That's in the car starts moving.
R1. I don't remember that.
Let's go. Al, I'll grab you for this one.
It is.
Cool. Lie down on the floor for me, head facing that way. So if you have a look at your form, we're basically looking, can we get the arms overhead? And by overhead, we're talking basically a straight line from the hand through the elbow, through the shoulder, down to the ground, right? If I was to look at them side on, could I draw a vertical line in this position between the hand, elbow, shoulder, hips, knees, and ankles? Neutral spine. This is basically it. This is the position we want. What I'm looking for is he going to have to be forced to compromise that good spine position in order to get overhead? Humerus position, if you have a look, it says 0 degrees, 45 degrees, 45 plus. What we're talking about is the space between the humerus and the head. 0 is basically straight across, 45 outside 45 in order to get them to the primary position we want. And hey, you gonna be all right with this one? Yeah? Cool. So I'm starting in a fairly similar position how I did with the hip scour, kneeling alongside them. Don't want to hold the hand, right? Because the wrist is going to move. I want to hold the forearm and just behind the elbow so I can keep the legs right. So I can keep that locked out, right? If I hold here, it doesn't work. We've cocked that elbow and now we can start rotating easily. So he's just going to lie here. I'm going to make sure his palms facing down, elbows facing away from the body. I'm just going to start moving that up, keeping the elbow locked out. Your back moving off the elbow. Cool. So that's pretty much, I'd call that 0 degrees, right? That's a full overhead position. Much more. Yeah, no change. Okay, so what you're going to see, yeah, so if he, let's say Al's end range at the shoulder is here, but he wants to get overhead, hold that there for me, what's going to happen is he's going to pop that up and arch his back. So the angle here hasn't actually changed. All he's done is just change the angle that his chest is actually facing, right? So when someone's standing, they start here and they cock. So now they've got this vertical position, they've got a bit of stability, they can't go anywhere, right? As soon as I want this to move, legs to move, they're done, right? All they can do is press overhead. All good? Yep. Cover everything? Yeah. So that humerus position, I don't know if you guys could see it, it's pretty much straight up and down, right? It wasn't cocked out to the side or anything like that.
Brilliant.
Any pain?
No.
Not yet. Cool.
So you're not going to come across too many with that good of range of motion, are you?
Not that narrow,
That's pretty good.
right? Most people probably won't. About here, sort of like around about 45, a little bit inside it, is about as narrow as I find most people get. And I haven't found too many people that go super duper wide. Right? Any questions before we break up? In the movement families, you've got presses and pulls. Most of what I talk about is going to be in the context of a press. Right? Overhead press, bench press, that sort of stuff. The reason why they're combined together is that the passive requirements and the active requirements are almost identical regardless of whether you're pushing, pressing, or pulling, right? Still have the same requirement. Like if I'm doing a pull-up or an overhead press, requirement for the core is identical. Be still, be neutral, start and finish in the same position. Allow the shoulders and the hips to gain leverage. Right? The primary difference between them is what's happening here, and that's it. Shoulders are doing the same thing, legs are doing the same thing, core's doing the same thing, hips doing the same thing. And the range requirements are the same. My pull-up is that mechanic, right? My press going in the opposite direction, but I'm basically starting and finishing in the same position. This is why we've combined them together, right? Mm-hmm. So this one that we've just done, think about what positions does that start to look like? It looks like the end of an overhead press. It looks like the down position in an overhead, in a chin-up. If I change the stance, it looks like the torso and upper body extremity position for an overhead squat. Cool? Mm-hmm. Sweet. How'd everyone go with that one? It's pretty simple. There's not much to go on with there. Anyone got any questions about it?
The hardest part of it is recognising when the hip moves or when you get that turning.
So I tend to look at the base of the sternum.
Yeah.
Right? So if they're going to extend, you're going to see that sternum come out on the other side. Tend not to look here because you might have some people who've got big bellies and it doesn't show up as much. But yeah, ideally you want to get a lay of the lay of the land before you start moving them. You know, get a rough idea of where they sit where they lie in a neutral position. So when they move, you sort of, oh, this one doesn't look like it used to, right? Something's changed. I was saying before as I was walking around, you probably want to go through it twice per arm. One to see where the arm gets to, another one to go back to that point and see if they open up at the ribs. Cool? Right, so that's the end of all of the passive tests. That's it. Passive stress, we're going to move on to active stress. Before we move on, give me a definition of passive stress. What are the sort of things that we're looking for? Well, what are we assessing? Structural. Yeah, structural. Yeah, the hardware, the shit you can't change. That's going to give us an idea of our clients' limitations. Cool. And sort of the parameters for the movements that we're going to program. Now we're going to go into active stress. Active stress, we're starting to look at things that involve strength, coordination, proprioception. Yeah? So we've created our parameters for their capacity to move. within those three movement families. Now we're going to see what they can do within, right? Where do they start to fall apart? So we can get an idea of where we want to start fixing them as far as how they move. The first one is the arch test. It'll be nice and quick too. Right. The arch test is sort of primarily a gymnastics movement, right? And you see it with all your CrossFit sort of stuff. You've got the arch and the hollow body. It's basically the two building blocks that allow you to kick when you're doing pull-ups. So, where have we done there? Got you for the arch. Thanks, Ellie. So, just lie face down on the ground for me, facing that way. So the arch is broken into two phases, right? We've got a self-assisted arch. We've got a self-assisted arch, which is basically them getting an idea of how to get into the position. And all we're going to do is have a look at whether they have the strength to maintain that position once we get there. Then we're going to go on to the self-generated arch, which is can they go from a prone position on the floor and do they have the strength and now coordination to recreate that position? Yeah, the primary things we're looking at are global extension of the spine and whether they can resist flexion of the spine. So you think about your deadlifts, you think about your squats, this is a kinesthetic reference for resist the bar heeling you over, right? So, I'm going to do it here so you can see what I'm doing.
Great.
So basically starting in a push-up position on the ground. I'm going to have my hands a little bit behind my shoulders and in nice and close to the body. I want to be relaxed all through the tummy, right? I want to try and drive this as much as possible with the arms. I'm going to start pushing up until my belly button's just about to leave the ground, and I'm going to stop. Ellie's going to squeeze her butt, her shoulders, and her midline, and slowly lift her hands off the ground. Right? Yeah. So, the reason why we have the self-generated thing is it makes it very difficult for them to not get into the correct position. Right? All we're trying to do is take away their opportunity to do the movement incorrectly and our opportunity to assess the incorrect movement. Right? So, find that position, hands in a push-up position. Oh. So push-up position for anyone who's not aware, hands behind the shoulders, right? Close to the body, because it's a tricep movement. It's not 90 degrees if you don't come up because you hit your balls. Other thing we're looking for, index finger points directly forward, right? See how your index finger's pointing in? Yep, fingers splayed, index finger pointing forward. Floppy belly, as floppy as you can get it. Slowly pushing up with the arms until your belly button's about to leave the ground. Then stop. As soon as you're there, squeeze your butt hard as you can. Squeeze your shoulders, tight here, hold it, slowly lift your arms off the ground. 1, 2, 3, relax. Cool? So, we're in the self-assisted arch. We want them to hold for 3 seconds, right? You see on there, consistent, struggled, DNF, did not finish. I'd say that's consistent, right? Her position was fairly stable throughout. There wasn't like you see, especially like big like twitches at the shoulders, at the butt. If the hamstrings and the calves start twitching, it's normally the nervous system going, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, right? It's normally like, I haven't had to do this before. They just gets lost and doesn't know how to find the position. So I'd say that's struggling, right? When it starts twisting, it could be a strength thing, it could be coordination, doesn't matter. If it's starting to wobble all over the place, struggle. Did not finish. As soon as you go lift the arms off the ground, they go, right, and come straight back down, that's a did not finish, right? Failed to maintain the position. So come back and we'll go through.
Really? What is the bed?
88.
Right, so we talked about kinesthetic references before. This is one of them.
Wow.
Resisting spinal flexion in the squat, deadlift and press. Arching for the arch bench press. And as far as sort of resisting, stabilising, this and the next test go together to create sort of co-contraction where we just have a consistent spine position. Right, so before you sort of pushed yourself up, created the position, and then it was just a case of get everything tight enough to hold it and then start to let go. I want you to start here and create it from scratch, right? You're not allowed to push up. You have to use strength to get yourself there.
Everything.
Right, so you're going to start up in the same position. You're going to squeeze your butt, squeeze your shoulders, and then you're going to start arching up.
I think,
Yeah. So butt first, shoulders, glutes. Pretty good, right? Relax. Again, same deal. 3-second hold. Is there any pain? All good?
Yeah.
Sweet, let's go. Knock out the arch.
Is that
Both
global?
Cool. So the hollow test, we're looking at the same, roughly the same thing, except this time we're looking at flexion. But if you have a look at the test, we're collecting primarily the same data. Get them to hold for 3 seconds, doing a self-assisted hollow, where you help them find the position, and a self-generated hollow, where they have to create it from scratch from the ground. This is a more difficult movement to achieve. And pain is the other thing we're looking at. Again, there's more detail in the cheat sheets, but you can go over that in your own time. Can I grab you for this one? Head facing that way. Cool. So I just want you to put your hands on your chest for me for now. I want you to get your legs and point them, like we basically want to bring the legs to here, point your toes at the roof for me, squeeze your butt, hold your legs in this position. Place your arms on front of your shins for me, reach as far up as you can. Reach up, reach up, reach up. Now we've got our hollow position. Cool? Right, what I want you to do is slowly lower down your legs so that they're pointing over there, and keep your hands in contact with the legs as you do. Lowering the legs, keep those knees extended and the toes pointed to that.
Thank you for not.
Keep going.
For this one.
What's that?
Keep
It's
going.
so hard.
Now your balance is going to shift. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
it or stay here?
Just let it pull you. There we go. Steady there. 2, 3, relax. Cool. So with some people, especially if their legs are real heavy, you're going to see them tip at a certain point, right?
I could have stayed
So is the torso supposed to
Yeah.
come up and follow the legs down?
Torso does come up, but you've got to think about where, is there anything actually changing in the torso? And ideally, it's not, right? The legs are just pulling it. So what'll happen is he'll go up, and he's got his flexion here, right?
It's supposed to stay down?
They will towards the end, right?
Yeah.
But not right now. So this is basically my global flexion, shoulders off the ground, hips off the ground. As I bring my legs down though, my hips are touching the ground now, right? As my legs get lower and lower, heavier, they're going to tip me. So my global flexion is hips off the ground, spine continues to curve up until I get to the shoulders, right? If it breaks, what's that?
But you've got your hands beside and Joe had them on top.
Oh yeah, it's just because I'm used to doing the movement that way.
Yeah.
So you still do the same thing, and then from there,
Yeah.
right? So if it's not global, it's normally a strength issue. What you'll see is they get here, and if you have a look, there's a gap under here because they just can't keep that together, or they'll be fine here, and they'll just drop the shoulders, right? Oh.
So you're looking for a position in which the shoulders drop or the back arches?
Lumbar arches, yeah.
But you're supposed
So you
to
shouldn't
go
be able to
with
get your hand
the-
underneath them at the bottom.
You're supposed to go with the feet.
Correct.
Yeah.
So once those legs get far enough down, they don't weigh anymore, but the leverage is going to tip them, right? It's going to exert more leverage on the body, and they will probably tip as a result. I think you've done it, maybe you haven't done it before. If you're doing it with someone that's never seen the movement before, do it for them first. So when you go to tip, it's normal. It's supposed to happen, so they don't freak out and fuck up the assessment for you. Cool? Right. So that's the self-assisted. Put the legs up in the air, get them to reach up. That's going to get you global flexion position. Next one's self-generated. Feet and knees together, toes pointing away from you. No, I'm flat on the ground. What I want you to do is start reaching towards your feet with your hands. And as you do that, you're going to bring these 2 points together. So sliding your hands forward, that's it. Keep going, good. Lock out your knees, squeeze your bum, there we go. As soon as he squeezes the bum, the legs should come up, right? So he's done the self-generated one as well, right. He's got the strength to get there, he's got the coordination to replicate the movement, and this is another kinesthetic reference, right? Talking before about overhead positions where the ribs pop up, close down your ribs. It's not a comfortable position. I guarantee they're going to remember it. Right, so the broomstick bow, we're essentially assessing someone's capacity to do a conventional deadlift. It has application outside of that, primarily teaching people how to break at the hips correctly without doing that, which is a bad idea. But we're primarily assessing a conventional deadlift and the components of that. Now, something I always tried to keep in mind when I was programming for my clients was take away as many opportunities for them to make a mistake as possible, right? So when I regress or progress a movement, I'm trying to design it in a way that they can't help but focus on the problem that I want them to solve. This test is a great example of how you can take away someone's opportunities to make a mistake and assess exactly what you want, right? So the broomstick bow, we're using points of contact to get them into the position we want. To get a neutral spine, okay? Most people, you go, give me a neutral spine, and you watch them deadlift, they do that as they come down. Yeah, cervical spine is part of it. So give them points of contact, head, shoulders, and butt. Now I'm straight. Yeah? If I'm touching the broomstick in the right place, I'm trying so hard not to make it 3 point right now. If I'm basically set up correctly with the right points of contact, I can't help but be straight. If I'm doing what we talked about before, and I cock the head back, I lose that point of contact with the shoulders and I'm no longer straight, right? You don't need to be able to see, if you're performing the movement, you don't need to be able to see yourself. It's just, can you feel the broomstick at those 3 points? Yes, then you're straight. If you can't, then you've compromised your position. The fourth point of contact is normally going to be a bench, right? In this case, I'm just going to use the chair, and it's going to be to put the shins against. It needs to be something you can get your feet under, right? Perpendicular shins. And it needs to be in front of you, because the shins are relatively straight, the calves aren't necessarily, depending on where you put it. So, setup. Head, shoulders, and butt, and just get them to walk in until they touch the bench or the chair that you put in front of them. Ideally, we want them in a called power position in Olympic lifting with the feet directly under the hips, right? If you did your scout test earlier though, and you realise that this narrow position, they can't get anywhere near 90 degrees, get them to go to that good position that you found, like, you know, how narrow can they go without jamming the feet into the hip. For me, I know I'm fine in this position. So I set up my 4 points of contact, and I'm basically just going to tell the person, send your hips back as far as you can without losing any points of contact. And as I get there, it starts to look like a conventional deadlift, like I'm way below where I need to be, right? Takes away their opportunity to make a mistake. All you have to do is hinge, don't lose any points of contact. First time they go through the assessment, I'm just familiarising them with the process. The second time, I'm going to take the broomstick off them, bottom position, and get their arms to hang down by the sides of their legs. Now I know how far down I can get them with perpendicular shins with their deadlift, right? And perpendicular shins is...
This bloke.
What's that?
You're made to deadlift. Those arms.
Yeah, you see with snatch,
halfway down
like
your
parallel in the snatch. Yeah. You see what we're talking about? So we're primarily looking at, can they maintain a neutral spine? It's going to be pretty obvious if they don't, because you've got the broomstick as your guide of what straight is supposed to look like. As far as the hip hinge, got it as controlled or awkward. Okay, mine was controlled. Awkward is when it's sort of like they can't work it out, they have to keep changing their position in order to sort of refine the bar, right? So they're just not good at hinging at the hips without destroying everything else in the process. Hand reach. How far are they getting? Above the knee, at the knee, below the knee. Knee faults. Hyperextension. You see a lot of people, when they want to get lower, especially if you watch them actually deadlifting with the barbell and they want to move past the knee, they'll get down, 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 down,
Yeah.
and they start to move the knees out of the way of the bar, right? You might see it with some people where they're coming down and they'll just move the knees back unintentionally, right? Or they might go the other way. They might get down and run out of room and they start driving the knees forward to get there. We're looking for flat and balanced feet. Anyone notice what happened to my feet when my knees went forward? Yeah. So I basically exceeded the structural limitation of the ankles. Those knees want to go further forward, I've got to compromise. The heels are going to come up. And pain. There probably won't be any pain. There may be if they're nice and narrow and that femur hits the hip, right? But you've probably already identified that in the hip scout, so you'd be ready for it. We've got 2 broomsticks up here.
I agree.
Yeah? We'll start getting some people going through it. There's a bench over there. There's a couple of chairs kicking around. Start, break up into your pairs. Oh, sorry, has anyone got any questions on it before we go through? It's pretty simple, pretty
I
self-explanatory.
noticed you let your knees track out at the
Yeah, I
bottom
did.
there.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I just did because the chair wasn't there to brace me. Ideally, I don't want them to move at all, right? So if it's me being tested, my knees have to stay here.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go until I run
Was
out
that
of
an
room.
example then? I missed something there.
What's that?
I missed something there when you did it then.
Why?
Because you did let them go.
Oh, I did, just because my face was going to hit the chair if I was going to go
so you
down
could
any
see
further.
when to come
yeah,
back,
and you see
yeah.
it push my head off when I got down there?
Yeah, then
So
I did.
the chairs, standing straight arm raise. You've all done the supine one already. That was a passive test. This is an active test. Right, so now we're seeing whether the client's actually able to get to that range that we were able to find for them before. Perform the movement with their back against a wall, right? It's going to be a good reference for them as far as what straight is, and it's going to be a good reference for you, childish, as far as whether they extend the spine as they get there, right? Yeah. Pretty much all the same rules apply as did for the supine version that we were doing on the floor, right? Still looking same start position, same finish position, and we're collecting the same information, right? Are they able to get to that overhead position where we can stack the wrists over the shoulders, over the hips, over the ankles? Can they maintain a neutral spine throughout? Their humerus position, whether it's 0 to 45, 45 plus, and whether there's any pain there. Cool? Let's do it over here just because the light's going to get in the way there. Steph, or grab me. So guys, come over here and stand either here or here so you can be able to sort of see the back, the sides of Steph as she's in this position. Cool. So stand with your back to the wall for me. So remember the one we did on the ground? Yeah. So fingers extended, palms flat, fingers pointing towards the ground. Yeah. So basically butt and shoulders in contact with the wall, elbow locked out. There we go. Right, we're going to do the right hand side first. What you're going to do is just see if you can bring that arm all the way up until the back of the palm touches the wall. But that's going to be extended. Extend your elbow. There we go. Right, so come back down. So again, with the active ones, sometimes you might have to go through it a couple of times so they're familiar with what you're actually asking of them, and then you can worry about watching them. Just got to stay locked out. Go ahead again. Yeah. So you see, like this position here, it's stacked, right? Stacked correctly. I'm going to hold your hand here. Remember, we're doing the hollow body position. Talking about closing that, so you can close that gap. Bring this to here. Yeah? Does that look better? It certainly looks better from where I'm standing, and that's in there. If they break, right, and they extend that position, use that kinesthetic reference to see if they can recover it, because we're testing active. What can they do? We can fix it now. We know they can get there. Just got to be wary of, ensuring that they keep hitting that position when they're pressing. Cool? Do the same thing for both arms. Any questions?
That was heaps easier coming to his house.
Yeah. It's that last bit of extension of the elbow. Just talking before, sorry, when we're on the ground, cocking the elbow and internal rotation. Just basically like unlocking the shoulder, right? I want you to come up. Yeah, step forward for me. Cool. I'm going to come up, so the wall will get in the way here. Keep that locked, keep that tight. Right, so that's her overhead position. If I go past there, yeah, I've got to go wider. If I don't want to go wider, what if I'm doing my kipping pull-ups and I'm coming forward? Pop your elbow out to the side for me.
Ew.
Now I can get in there, right? That's why we want to have that elbow locked out. That's why we're watching to see if that shoulder rotates and pops forward. Cool?
Cool.
Breaking your pants, let's go. You are the things that we've assessed so far, and we want to see how they all play when we're forcing them to play together at the same time. There are too many to get at once. Get them to perform the movements a few times so you can break down all of those problems into smaller ones. So, looking for neutral spine, looking to see if hyperextension is used to cheat the overhead position for the front squat and for the overhead squat. We're looking for butt wink. We're looking for basically hip tilt, hip rotation. Butt wink is a type of hip tilt, okay, but we're not talking about sort of anterior, posterior when I'm saying hip tilt. We're talking about left and right hip tilt. Cool. The main reason that's an issue is because the spine is attached to the hips. The primary mechanism of injury for the discs is compression, right? So a deadlift, a squat, an overhead press, and flexion and extension of the spine. You can lift with a flexed spine and it's not going to delaminate your discs as long as you start and finish in the same position. It's when you move it under compression, right? Hips are attached to the spine. Hips move, you change, you basically move the spine throughout the movement. So that's why we're watching for that tilt as we start getting into the front squat and the overhead squat, we're looking at the scapula. Are they shrugged up around the ears, or are they pulled down in a nice strong position? Overhead position, just like we did before with the standing arm raise, elbows have got to be locked out. And we're looking at the lower extremities as well, right? So where do the knees track? Are they pigeon-toed? Are they neutral? Are they sort of at a pretty sort of, it's like a 45-degree position? Are they doing something crazy where they're real wide and all they can do from there is go into a valgus knee position and fuck themselves up? Ankles collapse, heel lift, toe arch. These are all things that are going to give us indications on where they're trying to find their balance in their squat, how they stabilize themselves, why they do or do not get sufficient depth compared to the passive stuff that we looked at the start.
Toe arch, toes to the ceiling.
What's that?
Toe arch like that.
Yeah. So what we're looking for is the toes lifting up off the ground primarily. Again, we're talking about like with Steph's shoes and with mine, they tilt up towards the end. So you've got to have an idea of where the toe actually is in the shoe so that you don't get bad information.
We get them in, is it wise to have them in socks or barefoot in this or no?
It's really up to you. If you like, if they've got weird shoes and they point up, you've got a couple options. Get them to take their shoes off, or just find out where the toe sits in the shoe before they start. Right? We'll really leave it up to you, but just be aware that it's something that you have to account for if it's coming up, so you don't get bad information. So we've got 3 squats that we're going to test. We've got the back squat, front squat, and the overhead squat. They're all done at body weight. Right? And what we're essentially doing is increasing the passive and active demands on the client's body as we go through those squats, right? So as we go front squat, we're increasing the demands on thoracic extension through the spine, increased range through the shoulder. As we go overhead, we increase that again. When we've got the elbows locked out, we start here, right? And if they're real good, we go to this position, which is inside that 0 degree position we were testing for the overhead stuff. The flexion requirements at the hip change as well, right? When you front squat, you can't afford to be over like this and stop your squat here because the bar's going to fall off you. You have to be upright, which means you've got to get deeper, not even deeper, but you have to create a more acute flexion at the knee and at the hip to get there. Same deal for the overhead squat, right? So we're increasing passive and active stress demands on our clients as we go through these 3 tests to try and break them. Not literally break them, we're looking for where they start to fall apart. And that's going to give us an idea of where we want to put our effort programming, not programming, etc. So, squat test is fairly basic. Get them to sort of find the rough position that you agreed on with the hip scour and the quadruped rock. Let them find their own foot position, because if you're programming for someone that you're not going to be coaching all the time, you don't want to put them here and find out that they squat here most of the time, right? If they're training without you there. Get them to find their own foot position, roughly the same width of the stance that you determined during the hip scour and the quadruped rock, and then just get them to squat however they're comfortable, right? Just a normal squat. Main thing is, don't want this shit. Hands in front, arms out, whatever works for them, right? Now, there's so many things on that list that we want to pick up. You're probably going to want to walk around a bit while you're testing them, get them to do a few different versions of the squat. Okay, that's our back squat. Front squat. One hand over the other, behind the base of the skull and the neck where those 2 parts join, elbows forward, right? So what we're actually doing now is exceeding the demands of a front squat. The arms are having to go up higher. The hands are having to come in further. Because of that, we're actually demanding more thoracic extension than they would need to give in a front squat. Same deal. Get them to squat down, see whether they start to break their position as they get there, or they hunch down. If they do, some of the things we've tested already can be used as a kinesthetic reference to try and fix that. If they're doing this and hunching over, go, no, I need you to arch your spine just like the arch test and see if they can maintain it, right? Last one is the most difficult, and that's the overhead squat. So essentially arms straight up overhead, get them to drop down into their squat position. If they can get there, make it more difficult. Get them to grab their hands together and see if they can achieve the same thing without ruining their position. Or if they do, find out where they start to fall apart. Cool? Most people are not going to be able to get that last version of the overhead squat. Any questions? Cool. Let's go through it. Make sure you're taking your time as you go through to get them to do a few reps, so you're collecting all that information. Well, this one will take a little while too, because we've got a fair few tests and a fair bit of data to collect.
Just out of interest,
Yeah.
why not this position?
So
Let's change your
let's
ability, or
change. So it does. We're talking about overhead positions here. When I bend the elbow, so this is essentially internal rotation. It's not going any further, right? The rack position is the opposite way. It's external rotation. If I let you do this, you internally rotate. Scapula is basically has to work harder to stabilize itself, and I compromise the way the interface reacts with the core. So I basically set them up for failure, and that's not what I want to do. I want to take the best possible version of the movement, give them the best possible chance of success, and then see where they start to fall apart. And then I basically just put more and more stress on them until I find their points of failure, and you just start working through them and fixing them. Cool?